Hi, this is Steve with Thresher Media Group. Welcome to When You're Ready to Listen. This podcast is dedicated to exploring the truth about God, things you may not have understood, may not have been taught, or quite frankly, had a very hard time believing. And since our entire relationship with God rests on believing, it is important we learn how to separate the truth from the many lies and fictions that abound within the religion of Christianity. So when you're ready to listen, tune in and discover a pathway to freedom, encouragement, life, and hope. Episode 136, Revelation 16, verses 17 through 21. In our last podcast, we examined a promise for those who are now staying awake, now keeping their clothes on, so that they may now not walk about naked. And a warning for those who don't. Jesus comes in our now and wants us to let him into every area of our life, as he wants to dispossess or thieve those things within us that fight against him being our I am. He wants to steal our guilt, our shame, our fear, our judgment and condemnation, as well as all our pathetic attempts at religious repentance. He wants us to choose to be clothed in the garments of Yahweh Sidkenu, Yahweh our righteousness. We also studied the hidden code within the code, revealing a mystery that was only uncovered through a diligent search of the codex. We learned that Har Magidon, which is transliterated in our Bibles as Armageddon, literally means the Mount of Gathering or the Mount of Gashing, and it points to one place, Jerusalem. The spirits of demons will gather the spiritual rulers of this world and all their armies to Jerusalem for the war of the great day of God the Almighty. You've heard it said that X marks the spot. In this case, X is Jerusalem, the Mount of Gathering, the Mount of Gashing. Now let's pick back up with the seventh and final vial of Yahweh's wrath that is poured out upon the earth. Bowl 7. It is done. Revelation 16, 17 through 21. Then the seventh angel poured out his vial upon the air, and a loud voice came out of the sanctuary from the throne, now saying, "It has been done." And there were by choice flashes of lightning, and sounds and peals of thunder. And there was by choice a great earthquake, such as there had not been by choice since man came, by choice to be upon the earth. So great an earthquake was it, and so mighty. The great city was split by choice into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And Babylon the Great was caused to be remembered before God, to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce, wrathful anger. And every island fled away, and the mountains were caused to not be found, and huge hailstones, about 100 pounds, now came down from heaven upon the men. And the men blasphemed the God because of the wound of the hail. For great now is the wound, extremely severe. The God of enough. Then the seventh angel poured out his vial upon the air, and a loud voice came out of the sanctuary from the throne, now saying, "It has been done." There is an amazing attribute of God of which many people are not aware, and that he is the God of enough. He always says enough, whether it was with the flood, the judgment of nations detailed all throughout the Codex, and even in the individual judgments he brings on his people. There's always a point where he says enough. In this instance, his purpose is to purify the earth, and when the sacrifice of humanity has been made, he brings it all to a close by saying, "It has been done." His purposes have been completed. 7 vials picture the complete exhausting of the wrath of God. According to the code, 7 is the number representing completion. No more is needed. Therefore, when the 7th vial is poured out upon the air, a loud voice came out of the sanctuary, the naos, the holy place, and from Yahweh's throne, now saying, "It has been done." Even though we might expect it, the Greek word that is used for this phrase, "it has been done," is not tetelestai, which means it is finished or paid in full. Rather, it's the word genomai, which means to cause to be, This verb is in the perfect active indicative, hence, it has been done. This means that God previously caused it to be finished. It has been determined, and now it is finished. In other words, none of this was a reaction, but the systematic fulfillment of a predetermined plan. Plan A. Enough was always Plan A. It has been done was declared sometime in the past, and it finally comes to fruition at this time. And that is a statement of fact, hence the use of the indicative mood. God sets a limit to his judgment. This time of reckoning was not an out-of-control fit of anger. Rather, as with all judgment which God brings into our lives, it is perfectly measured and fixed from before time. Unlike what most of us believe, his judgment is never a reaction to our behavior or to our sin. We never catch him off guard and force some sort of sudden reaction from him. After all, he is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. He knows all things before they happen. This declaration, it has been done, gives us confidence that he is just in his judgment. He knows exactly what he intends to accomplish with everything he does. It's all purposeful, planned, intentional, and comes to be exactly as he purposed, planned, and intended. This should bring us comfort in our day in and day out lives. For those on the earth, it has been done must be the best words they have ever heard. The effects of this seventh vial are about to be unveiled, and they are terrible. But to know that there is an enough is beyond amazing. With this voice coming from the throne, we know this is the voice of the Lion, the Lamb, the Lord, our God Almighty. Earthquake, Revelation 16:18. And there were, by choice, flashes of lightning and sounds and peals of thunder. And there was, by choice, a great earthquake, such as there had not been by choice since man came by choice to be upon the earth. So great an earthquake was it, and so mighty. Yes, the rendering of that was a bit awkward with all the by choice references, but it is critical that we capture the proper Greek voice, which ascribes responsibility to the action. In each of these instances, the verbs are all in the aorist middle indicative, indicating there was a choice by the one doing the act. What we should take away is that nothing is random when it comes to God and his plan A. All is planned. All things result as a choice he made to bring lightning, thunder, and earthquake, and even the placement of men upon the earth. God is the one who is responsible. He made a choice, and that is a statement of fact. The final vial is poured out upon the air, and it's like a grand finale of disaster. It has all the requisite fanfare of lightning, sounds, and peals of thunder. It's as if the Lion of Judah is roaring from the heavens, and the whole world shakes and trembles in fear. All this celestial activity is initiated from the sanctuary, the holy place of God's temple in heaven. And then there comes a megas earthquake, such as there had not been since man came to be upon the earth. So great an earthquake was it, and so mighty. This is the third great earthquake. One has been unleashed with the final event associated with each series of judgments. The first occurrence happened when the Lamb broke the seventh seal. An angel threw the gold incense burner filled with fire from the altar in heaven down upon the earth. Thunder crashed, lightning flashed, and there was a terrible earthquake. The second occurrence happened when the seventh trumpet was blown. Lightning flashed, thunder crashed and roared, and there was a great hailstorm, and the world was shaken by a mighty earthquake. Now, with the pouring out of the seventh bowl of wrath, we have the greatest of all earthquakes. So great an earthquake was it, and so mighty. According to the code, 3 is the number representing perfection, and 7 represents completion. The seventh of each major series of judgments, 777, is God's calling card, so to speak, of complete authority over all of creation, as he enacts a perfectly complete judgment, 3 sets of 7. And since this earthquake is so great that none can compare to it, we can be sure that it will cause great changes in the landscape of our world. Things will not be the same. Much that was thought to be solid and secure and in place will be shaken, loosened, and removed. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 10 through 12. You, Lord, in the beginning laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are now the works of your hands. They will, in the future, choose to perish, but you now remain, and they all will, in the future, be caused to become old like a garment, and like a mantle, you will, in the future, roll them up. Like a garment, they will also in the future be caused to be changed. But you are now the same, and your years will not in the future come to an end. Hebrews 12:25 through chapter 13, verse 1. You are now commanded to behold, that you may not choose to refuse him who is now speaking. For if those did not escape when they chose to be refusing him who warned them on earth, much less will we escape who turn away from him who is now warning from heavens. And his voice shook the earth then. But now he chose to have promised, now saying, yet once more I in the future shake not only the earth, but also the heaven. This expression, yet once more, now signifies the transposition of those things which have been caused to being made, to be caused to now be shaking, as of created things, so that those things which cannot be caused to now be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are now receiving a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let us now show grace by which we may now offer to God an acceptable service with reverence and awe. For our God is now a consuming fire. Haggai chapter 2, verse 6 through 8, and verses 21 through 23. For thus says Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts, once more in a little while I am going to shake the heavens and the earth, the sea also and the dry. I will shake all the nations, and they will come with the wealth of all nations. And I will fill this house with glory, says Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts. Speak to Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, saying, I'm going to shake the heavens and the earth. I will overthrow the thrones of kingdoms and destroy the power of the kingdoms of the nations. And I will overthrow the chariots and their riders, and the horses and their riders will go down, everyone by the sword of another. And finally, Isaiah chapter 2, verse 12 through 21. For Yahweh Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts, will have a day of reckoning against everyone who is proud and lofty, and against everyone who is lifted up, that he may be abased. And it will be against all the cedars of Lebanon that are lofty and lifted up, against all the oaks of Bashan, against all the lofty mountains, against all the hills that are lifted up, against every high tower, against every fortified wall, against all the ships of Tarshish, and against all the beautiful craft. The pride of man will be humbled, and the loftiness of men will be abased. And Yahweh alone will be exalted in that day. But the idols will completely vanish. Men will go into caves of the rocks and into the holes of the ground before the terror of Yahweh and the splendor of his majesty, when he arises to make the earth tremble. In that day, men will cast away to the moles and the bats their idols of silver and their idols of gold, which they made for themselves to worship, in order to go into the caverns of the rocks and the clefts of the cliffs before the terror of Yahweh and the splendor of his majesty, when he rises to make the earth tremble. The great city, Revelation 16:19. The great city was split by choice into 3 parts, and the cities of the nations fell. And Babylon the Great was caused to be remembered before God, to give her the cup of the wine of its fierce, wrathful anger. We addressed this phrase, the great city, in Revelation chapter 11, verse 8, where we are told that the 2 witnesses will be killed in the great city. We do not have to guess at its meaning, because this great city is also mystically called Sodom and Egypt. Sodom is a picture of spiritual adultery or fornication, and Egypt is a picture of oppression and domination. Understood collectively, the persecution of God's holy ones comes through the power of an empire which is founded upon a religious ideology. All we must do is examine the codex to discover that the great city is symbolism, a mystical name, just as the Spirit said. This reference is used a total of 8 times in Revelation. In each of the passages, it refers to the oppressive apostate religious system that is quite tyrannical in its mechanisms, that overcomes and subdues the two witnesses. Other identifying references to this great city refer to Babylon, code for the apostate religious system, and to the woman who rides the beast, the spirit behind the religious systems of our world upon which the beast rises to power. The spirit just comes out and says that this woman is now the great city which is now reigning over the kings of the earth. By the way, there are no symbolic connections between the great city and the literal city of Jerusalem or any other literal city. The symbolic connection is to Mystery Babylon, the apostate religious system that rules in the world of men, and to the woman who rides the beast, the spirit that is behind the religions of our world, specifically the religion of Christianity. Three-part division. The great city was split by choice into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell. This shaking, trembling, and quaking causes the great city of religious apostasy to be split into three parts, perfectly broken by the hand of God, by his choice. Because of this three-part division, the cities of the nations fell. It would be speculation to guess the specific divisions, much less the implications of this three-part division, as the Codex does not provide information on this matter. But we know this is a perfect division resulting from both the spiritual and the physical shaking. With that said, it is likely that God is dismantling the three pillars that comprise this great city: religion, wealth, and great institutional authority. Who knows? Perhaps God is separating them so that this city falls and remains fallen. Fell, Babylon the Great. Babylon was remembered. Babylon the Great was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. God remembers all that Babylon has done to his people, and he ensures that she drinks of the cup of his wrath. This is a clever play on words, which will become clear in the next chapter. In short, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth, caused those who dwell on the earth to be made drunk with the wine of her immorality. The people of the earth drank from her cup, and now she will drink of Yahweh's cup of the wine of his fierce wrath, mixed twice as much for her. What is bizarre, however, is what, or better said, who, God uses to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. Evil versus evil, Babylon's judgment. In Revelation 17 and 18, we get a glimpse of the tools of evil which God will use to judge evil. To judge this woman Babylon, who has led the nations into spiritual apostasy. We won't dig into the details now, but we should take a quick look at the text. Revelation 17, 15 through 18. And he now says to me, the waters which you saw, where the harlot now chooses to sit, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw, and the beast, these will in the future hate the harlot, and in the future will make her cause to being desolate and naked, and in the future will choose to eat her flesh, and in the future will burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose and by giving their kingdom to the beast, until the words of God will in the future be caused to be fulfilled. The woman whom you saw now is the great city, which is now reigning over the kings of the earth. And then Revelation 18:21 through 22. Then a strong angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, now saying, so will Babylon, the great city, in the future be caused to be thrown down with violence and will not be caused to be found any longer. Geographical and spiritual upheaval. And the cities of the nations fell. We do not know what is meant by the cities of the nations fell. It could be a statement on their spiritual standing, or it could just be a literal physical obliteration resulting from the great earthquake. And then again, it could be both. Either way, there's far more going on in this final devastation than meets the eye. With the signs in the skies and the upheaval of the earth, Jesus is changing the fundamental construct of our ecosystem as he prepares the earth to be healed. Shortly after this time, all creation will join God's children in freedom from death and decay. We are told that all creation longs and groans for that day of release. Yes, in the time immediately following the tribulation and this war of the great day of God the Almighty, the earth will be fundamentally different, altered, and its transformation will include a change in the base nature of animals. Isaiah 11, 6-9. In that day, the wolf and the lamb will live together. The leopard will lie down with the baby goat. The calf and the yearling will be safe with the lion, and a little child will lead them all. The cow will graze near the bear. The cub and the calf will lie down together. The lion will eat hay like a cow. The baby will play safely near the hole of a cobra. Yes, a little child will put its hand in a nest of deadly snakes without harm. Nothing will hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. For as the waters fill the sea, so the earth will be filled with the people who know Yahweh. Isaiah 65, 18-25. Be glad, rejoice forever in my creation. And look, I will create Jerusalem as a place of happiness. Her people will be a source of joy. I will rejoice over Jerusalem and delight in my people. And the sound of weeping and crying will be heard in it no more. No longer will babies die when only a few days old. No longer will adults die before they have lived a full life. No longer will people be considered old at 100. Only the cursed will die that young. In those days, people will live in the houses they build and eat the fruit of their own vineyards. Unlike the past, invaders will not take their houses and confiscate their vineyards. For my people will live as long as trees, and my chosen ones will have time to enjoy their hard-won gains. They will not work in vain, and their children will not be doomed to misfortune. For they are people blessed by Yahweh, and their children, too, will be blessed. I will answer them before they even call to me. While they are still talking about their needs, I will go ahead and answer their prayers. The wolf and the lamb will feed together. The lion will eat hay like a cow, but the snakes will eat dust. In those days, no one will be hurt or destroyed on my holy mountain. I, Yahweh, have spoken. You see, there's a lot more going on with this final bowl than just wanton destruction. It's also about Yahweh's plan for the redemption of the earth. Therefore, what has fallen needed to fall, and what God raises up will be unmovable. God is concluding his judgment of those marked for death, and he is purifying those who are marked for life. At the same time, he is redeeming creation and changing the fundamental construct of our atmosphere, the earth, and all the creatures of the earth. When he is done, it will all be different. Can you imagine? It'll be absolutely fascinating, a world unlike any of us has ever experienced. Revelation 16:20. And every island fled away, and the mountains were caused to not be found. It seems that the first two earthquakes shook things to such an extent that the third earthquake finished the task, and in so doing, the configuration of the earth is fundamentally altered. Every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. This third earthquake is going to change the landscape. Mountains will be crushed, and the islands of the earth will move away from their current positions, just as if they were fleeing. This will be a cataclysmic as God prepares for a time of redemption. Moreover, as we have learned, mountains are code for systems of belief, and islands would be smaller branches of those belief systems. This judgment might just have a physical and a spiritual impact. With this being a judgment that is in part targeted at apostate religion, Babylon the Great, perhaps this is saying that all other systems of belief will be shaken, leveled, and no one will be able to hold to them any longer. Even the smaller branches and denominations will flee in the face of the reality that Jesus is the Lord, God Almighty. They will know that they have believed a lie and that their religious or system of belief is impotent and capable of nothing. Hailstones, Revelation 16:21. And huge hailstones about the weight of a talent, 100 pounds, now came down from heaven upon the men. And the men blasphemed the God because of the wound of the hail, for great now is the wound, extremely severe. Distinct from the earthquake and the general geographical and structural upheaval resulting from this final vial, the very last statement about the hailstones has a dual meaning, being rendered in the present tense, now came down, and for great now is the wound. We know first and foremost that this is dealing with our now. In fact, if it were not for a specific verse in the Codex, we would have to conclude that it is only applicable to our now and is not associated with the final vial, but inserted by the Spirit for some other reason. But the Spirit made sure that the careful student would discover that these hailstones are even now poured out and will, at the end of days, also be poured out as part of this final judgment. Yahweh once asked Job, "Have you entered the storehouses of the snow? Or have you seen the storehouses of the hail, which I have reserved for the time of distress, for the day of war and battle?" We know that pounding of these hailstones is a literal event and not just a metaphor, because the Codex speaks to this in many places. Throughout history, God often used hail as a battle technique. In the 7th plague, which fell upon Egypt, God used hail to destroy Egypt's crops. In the conquest of the Promised Land, God killed more of Joshua's enemies by a plague of hail than the Israelites killed by the sword. And we know that God was fighting on Joshua's behalf because Joshua's troops were kept safe from the plague of hail. In addition, when God brings the nations to the Mount of Gathering, the Mount of Gashing, Har Magidon, Yahweh makes this statement about the demonic spirit, Gog, and his armies. Ezekiel 38:21-23. I will call for a sword against him on all my mountains, declares Yahweh God. Every man's sword will be against his brother. With pestilence and with blood I will enter into judgment with him, and I will rain on him and on his troops, and on the many peoples who are with him, a torrential rain with hailstones, fire and brimstone. I will magnify myself, sanctify myself, and make myself known in the sight of many nations, and they will know that I am Yahweh. It's hard to imagine what this will be like, but we can be sure that with hailstones, each weighing 100 pounds, that they will fall at a velocity that will just rip through anything and everything. The only place to hide would be a cave, but even then, all the mountains have collapsed, and it'll be hard to find even a cave or a hole in which to hide. Just think about the moral effect of this pounding. It will be devastating. There will be no hope. As such, they continue to curse God and refuse to relent of their pride, rebellion, and hatred. Perhaps this is the reason the hail was sent in the first place, because of the impertinent cursing of the Lord. Leviticus 24:15-17. And speak to the people of Israel, saying, whoever curses his God shall bear his sin. Whoever blasphemes the name of Yahweh shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him. The sojourner as well as the native, when he blasphemes the name, shall be put to death. In the Levitical system, the law, the community is to execute capital punishment via stoning on those who blaspheme the name of Yahweh. In this instance, and in like manner, the heavenly congregation does the stoning with hailstones to those who blaspheme the name of Yahweh. It is happening now. And huge hailstones about the weight of a talent, 100 pounds, now came down from heaven upon the men, and the men blasphemed the God because of the wound of the hail, for great now is the wound, extremely severe. With the help of Job and Ezekiel, we are to understand this passage as communicating that there will be, in the end times, a literal pounding by hail. However, since the present tense is used, there's a deeper meaning to this passage. It's also a metaphor, a picture which the Spirit wants us to understand. In effect, God always brings a wound of hail, a pummeling upon the nations and peoples that curse or blaspheme his name. It's always just a matter of time. And without exception, those nations fall. They get pummeled by the enemies and by the crushing judgment symbolized in the hail until they can stand no further. The wound of hail is severe and always accomplishes its purposes. The Spirit is letting us know that the judgment of the nations is not just reserved for the end time. In those days, he will pummel the earth in judgment, restructuring the physical and spiritual landscape of the earth in preparation for his physical return. But he does the same now. He restructures the physical and spiritual landscape of the earth by pouring out his hail on the nations. In so doing, he preserves the godly and restructures the political, spiritual, and social fabric of society. Ask yourself, where is the Egyptian kingdom? Where is Assyria? Where is Babylon? Where is Persia? Where are the empires of our history? The Akkadian, Grecian, the Roman, the Holy Roman, the Ottoman, the Han, the Ging, the Achaemenid, the Byzantine, the Mongol, the Inca, the Aztec, the Seleucid, Spanish, the Portuguese, the French, the British, the Empire of Japan, the Russian Empire, or the Soviet Union. They have all been pummeled into oblivion, and in so doing, God restructured the political, spiritual, and social fabric of society. It may not always be readily apparent to us, but since this passage was rendered in the indicative, we know it's an unalterable statement of fact. And huge hailstones about the weight of a talent, 100 pounds, now came down from heaven upon the men. And the men blasphemed to God because of the wound of the hail, for great now is the wound, extremely severe. In this final judgment, the judgment of hail will bombard the earth. Mankind, the creatures of the earth, and all life will be pummeled over and over again. And it will be so severe and extreme that men will once again blaspheme God. In our next podcast, we will begin our venture into Revelation 17. I'm glad you've tuned in and have been ready to listen. To get a free download of the full written transcript with all the scripture references footnoted, please go to threshermediagroup.com. That is THRESHER mediagroup.com. This is Steve with Thresher Media Group. When you're ready to listen, tune in.